I have explored most of the coastline of western mainland Scotland, all the way from Kirkcudbright in the south to Loch Laxford in the north, as shown in green on the map. In my attempt to join up the dots, I knew I still had to go round Ardnamurchan, as shown in red, the most westerly point of mainland UK. It's well known for being a difficult passage. Now that I live in Loch I felt I needed to get used to it so I could easily access the small isles and Arisaig area, some of my favourite boating places. I had tried rounding the point several times before, and the last time was my small 2.75 metre F-rib with 6 horsepower outboard, but I abandoned this trip when huge boomers, at a guess 3 or 4 metres high, seemed to spring up at random times and places. I appreciate it's just big swells crossing shallow areas, but knew that if one started to rise as I was passing it in a small 2.75 metre boat, it would toss me in the air like a rag doll. So with these failed attempts behind me, I at least knew what to expect this time round. A promised weather window forecast of blue skies and light winds had me packing the grey Gurnard full of camping gear and enough fuel for a 200-mile trip. I launched the boat at Kelly's Pier, then parked the car and trailer at home before heading west down Loch Etive. Passing under the Connell Bridge, I soon reached open sea and pointed the bow towards Lismore Lighthouse, and the start of the Sound of Mull. Initially the crossing was smooth in the light winds, but as I approached Lismore, the winds and waves began to freshen and things became a bit more lively. The squall died again as I passed the lighthouse, and the initial tide race at this location was quiet. However, as I approached Duart Castle in the island of Mull, the wind returned and started to stir up the tide race, which was in full spring ebb. I was soon soaked to the skin as I was dressed for light winds and a calm sea. However, I still took time to admire the castle. And once past the castle, I decided to cross to the other side of the Sound of Mull, as it should be more sheltered there from the north wind. Halfway across, the wind continued to torment the tide race and soon whipped it up into an angry frenzy. The wind, now satisfied I was waterlogged, died again as quickly as it had appeared. Which perfectly illustrates just how unpredictable the sound of mull can be. I now headed to shore to dry off in a flat calm. I pulled over onto a rocky shore to change my shirt and woolen pullover, then scoffed a sandwich while admiring the scenery and wondering where the wind had come from. I didn't stay and wonder too long though, as I wanted to spend some time admiring other parts of this silent sound, so clambered back in the boat and continued ever northwards. I was now thoroughly enjoying cruising along and feeling the warm sun in my body, when only half an hour before I was soaked and shivering in the north wind. As I had all the time in the world, I decided to have a gawk at the fishing boat graveyard at Salon. I landed at the end of the abandoned slipway to keep the gurnard afloat in the still falling tide. Then I had a nosy while scoffing another sandwich. Being a lover of boats, I felt a little sad, so left again to continue on my way ever northwards. My mind was firmly fixed on rounding Ardnamurchan Point, and hoped my own boat would not end up in a graveyard during the attempt. But first I had to go to Tobermory, which is the principal town in the island of Mull. I took some time searching the coastline of Cave Island to see if there was any suitable landing and camping spots near Tobermory, but alas, it was impossible. Feeling rather thirsty from licking the sea salt from my lips and parched throat, I decided to land and refuel with an extra cool Guinness or 3. Sadly, just as I was getting the last of the salt out of my throat, it was time to go back to my boat before it was left high and dry in the falling tide. So I clambered back in the boat and headed for the nearest place I knew I could get a good night's sleep, at Loch-na-Drom na Buie, which is only a short hop, skip and splash away from Tobermory. I landed at low water and soon worked up another raging thirst, carrying all my gear to the camp spot that I normally stay at. Once I'd carried everything ashore, I then scoffed a banana like the greedy monkey I am, then made a coffee and added extra milk to help cool it, then washed everything down with a tin of black gravy. I then watched the grasses sway in the ever-rising wind and saw branches of trees dancing in unison. I knew I was doing the right thing by not continuing round Ardnamurchan Point until the following day, when hopefully the wind will be a little less. After I had quenched my thirst, I fell fast asleep in the warm afternoon sun. When I awoke, I spent the first half of the evening watching the boats coming in to anchor in Ardnamurchan No More, which is a well-known sheltered anchoring spot. I was thrilled to watch the Bessie Ellen arrive. She was built in 1906 and, although mostly cruises around the southwest of England, was up here on her Orca sighting special. I saw her the following day heading for Cana, and she was a magnificent sight under full sail. The wind died completely around 8 o'clock in the evening, and the midges descended in their millions. So I retreated to my tent, but didn't sleep that well. During the hours of darkness, something started wandering around outside the tent, making strange noises. I suspected it was a fox, but it made me feel uneasy. I also had bad dreams of 4-metre-high waves breaking over my little boat as I made my way around Ardnamurchan Point. So it wasn't a perfect day, but day one of another fantastic adventure was over, and I was really looking forward to what the following day would bring. And it brought a beautiful calm morning which was alive with midges. I put on my head net for protection, packed the tent and loaded the boat, all before 7 a.m. and before breakfast. I moved the boat 50 yards offshore so the midges couldn't find me, and enjoyed my breakfast cereal in peace. And apart from the many midges that had wanted me for breakfast, I realised it was a perfect day to go round Ardnamurchan Point. So I didn't complain too much as I slowly eased my way out of Ardnamurchan No More. Even the open sea was as flat as a mirror as I headed for the distant headland of Ardnamurchan. I timed the early start to hopefully coincide with slack water when passing the lighthouse. My only slight concern was the mackerel pattern the clouds formed in the sky. It often indicates changeable weather within the next 24 hours. I couldn't get a signal on my mobile phone to check for a forecast, so presumed it was still as forecast when I left Tinault. Light winds from the north. I confess my heart sank when I saw the thick band of sea mist on the horizon, as I would have to abort the trip if I couldn't see anything but fog. Then I realised I could just make out the low-lying island of Call, which was 10 miles from the headland, and the mist was beyond it, so my mood brightened again. Now that I was passing the headland of Mulbuddy, I knew I was at the point of no return. I was determined to get round Ardnamurchan Point, even if it killed me, so I was delighted that things were looking good. I knew I was only about a third of the way to the lighthouse when the swell started to get bigger. I also knew I was still in the shelter of a curving coastline, so expected it to increase the further round I went. I started to feel very small and vulnerable, as there was nowhere I could land if I got into difficulty or the outboard broke down. was totally alone in an unfamiliar seascape which seemed to go on and on forever, before eventually I saw the small isles in the far horizon. Then the lighthouse appeared. I knew I was nearing the crux of my journey. Then I was past the lighthouse and breathed a sigh of relief that there was no sign of white water or breaking boomers. But I was also aware I had an 8-mile open sea crossing to do in a small bouncing boat now. But I did feel happier knowing I was now in familiar waters again. I have no problem doing open sea crossings in small boats. Confidence comes with experience, and I just let myself flow with the rhythm of the waves. And before I knew it, I was in the sheltered waters of the island of Muck, one of the small islands I enjoy visiting. I took a nosy into Port Moore, which is the ferry terminal, but didn't land as I didn't want to upset the locals regarding COVID restrictions, etc. Besides, there is no shop or cafe to visit. I turned and toured round the western side of the island, where I did land in a quiet out-of-the-way beach. I was choking for a coffee, so had a brew up. Then admired the view across to the island of Rum. Rested and relaxed, I then continued my journey across to the island of Egg and started to circumnavigate it in a clockwise direction. The sea was calming down now the wind was dying, and I really enjoyed circumnavigating the island as it had been several years since I'd last done it. The wide-angle lens of the GoPro camera does not really convey the majestic height of the cliffs, and it also makes it appear that I was further from their base than I actually was. It really is an impressive rugged coastline, and there was not another person or boat in sight, which all adds to the wilderness experience. dry completely as I went round Egg and the sea flattened like a mirror surface. However, when I landed in the harbour, I couldn't help but notice the wind rising again, and this time it was from the south and not from the north. I thought of the macro clouds in the sky that morning, so tried to get a forecast but again couldn't raise a signal on my mobile phone. I'd initially planned camping overnight in Egg, but both the change in weather, the fact I'd forgotten to bring my blood pressure pills, and also because there are 3 tents already pitched in the area I normally camp at, I decided to head back round Ardnamurchan Point while I still could. And I'm glad I did, as I enjoyed an even smoother return journey than I did that morning. Once clear of the Ardnamurchan headland, I searched the entire coastline from Kilchoan to Maclean's Nose, looking for a campsite, but found nothing suitably sheltered from the freshening southerly winds. And as I was not far from Ardnamurchan, I decided just to spend the night there again. This time, after pitching a tent, I marked my boundaries with the spare anchor rope, just to keep midnight prowlers out of my hair, and I'm delighted to say that the werewolf of Ardnamurchan left me alone that night. The following morning brought a smur of rain and a steady breeze kept the midges away, so I enjoyed a lazy breakfast before loading up the boat, then making my way back down the Sound of Mull. The sea was still calm, but the forecast I read of the macro pattern clouds was more accurate than ex-sea weather. The conditions had changed in 24 hours. I got back to Lochetif just as the clouds started to clear, and when I landed at Tinalk it was blue skies again. Another great adventure was over, and I will go back round Ardnamurchan Point, but it will need to be exceptionally good weather. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.